When I was a kid, and I expect most of you had the same experience, my mother used to say, clean up your mess. If I spilled the milk or I had clothes around the room, it was my responsibility to clean it up because I made the mess. And the premise behind the bill before you is the same thing. For years, we had the Norwich State Hospital on that site. As we've learned, there's much contamination there. And as we've also learned, it's been a real impediment to developing the property. This bill is a caucus bill. It is not my bill. It is a caucus bill, and I think, as Representative Bowles said, it's an opportunity for all of us in that spirit of bipartisanship to really do meaningful economic development, especially for an area of our state that is in dire need of that economic development. We're talking about over 400 acres of prime real estate on the Thames River in the counties of Preston and Norwich. We've talked about how there's been a chilling effect, if you will, on the development of that property because of the unknowns of the contamination and the extent of that contamination. There's been talk about maybe $20 to $40 million in some cases that it might cost in cleanup. Well, what this bill says is, let's clean it up. You know, we talk about economic development, job creation, and how much we've needed, so desperately need that in the state. And we've had, as a legislature, as a state, we've made some investments, certainly under this Governor Malloy's administration. We've invested maybe $47 million in Cigna. We've invested $25 million in ESPN, $20 million in NBC. We've invested, as we know, about $300 million in Jackson Labs. And we could all have our various opinions of whether that was money well spent, but I think we all have to agree, we picked a winner in the case of Cigna, or picked a winner in the case of ESPN. These were individual corporations that we as a state are investing in. In this particular case, we're talking about $40 million potentially, maybe could be half of that, God willing, that we could invest in cleaning up our mess and making this incredible asset that we have as a state of Connecticut valuable and viable for development. The cleanup jobs alone would create economic activity and create jobs, let alone what we could do to attract all sorts of varied entities and organizations to come and develop parts of that land. Maybe even we could put aside some for open space, have the total community involved, all communities, Preston, Norwich, the entire area. It could really be a boom. You talk about economic development and investing back in the state. We're literally investing in the ground, literally investing in the ground. Let's clean up our mess to make this a viable economic development opportunity for the state of Connecticut. I think potentially, folks, we're talking about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of jobs and a shot in the arm to a region that so desperately needs it. I think it's good for all of us. It's good for Preston. It's good for Norwich. It's good for Connecticut. It's good for people who are looking for jobs. It's good for economic activity. It's something we can do together in a bipartisan way, working with the local municipalities. It seems like a win-win, but it goes back to that old saying that we all heard from our mothers: clean up your mess. We made the mess, let's clean it up. And that is the gist of the bill that's before you. And I think you folks have a lot of expertise in this committee to work out the details, and obviously in conjunction with the local officials, which is so necessary. But I think we wanted to put this bill forth to say, at least from the perspective of House Republicans, we are ready, willing, and able to stand behind that kind of investment in this area of the state.